Welcome back to Google Cloud's digital conference, Let's Talk AI. My name is Natalie Puco and I'm a Google Cloud customer engineer based in Sydney. And today I'm joined here by Andy Huang from Servian. How are you, Andy?
Good, how are you, Nat?
Very good. Andy's joining us, as I mentioned, from Servian, who's a partner that we work together very closely with, based out of Australia. And today we're going to be taking you through a presentation titled Moving AI Off Your Product Roadmap and Into Your Workstreams.
That's fantastic. Let's get started.
Let's get started. So, Google is an AI company, and we know that because a lot of the machine learning algorithms that you might use every single day in some of our consumer products like Gmail, YouTube, Android, they are really embedded into our consumer side of the business, and this is growing into our business. And of course, what we mean by that is in 2012, we had 0 machine learning models in our Google algorithms, and now in 2018, we have 7,500 different models actually in our own Google business. So Google is not new to the machine learning world, and this is something that not only are we implementing in our technology, but we're allowing businesses all over the world to make use of this machine learning algorithms. So again, as I mentioned before, you're probably used to playing with some of this machine learning technology. Andy, I know you just came back from a holiday in Japan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've used the Google Translate tool quite a number of times trying to understand what's on the menu.
Yeah, what's on the menu, that's a good one. So for example, being able to pick up your phone and put that in front of a menu and it being able to translate live in real time what it sees. So that's one example of our consumer machine learning algorithms. Next, of course, is Google Photos. So Google Photos is another great example of showing how we use our Vision API capability for us to be able to type in maybe the name of a place, or maybe a family member, or a dog, for example, and it being able to dynamically lift that content.
And one thing I actually use Google Photo quite a lot is I use it to sort my receipts, I use it to sort my invoice, actually search for text documents, and also use it for searching food, because I'm such a foodie.
You are a foodie, aren't you?
I've been looking for food pictures I take all the time.
Yeah, that's a really great example. The next is actually taking these machine learning models outside of our consumer side of our business and into our own enterprise. So at Google, we've developed our own machine learning algorithms, particularly in our data center side of our business. So these algorithms that we built internally have actually reduced data center cooling by 40%. So you can see here on the graph that on the left-hand side, when the ML control is on versus when the ML control is off, it's a significant decrease into the amount of power that we're using in our own data centers.
That's fantastic.
So who can actually use our AI today? So very few users today can actually create a custom model, and we need to make AI accessible to millions of people, and that's really what today's conference is all about.
Absolutely. How to actually move it off from the roadmap into workstreams.
Exactly.
And today, a lot of the AI is only accessible to the selected few, such as people who are very competent in deep learning networks and neural networks, and people who come from a data science background with great mathematical knowledge and statistical knowledge. Whereas with the 21 million developer community, how do we actually put AI and machine learning into the hands of them so that we can create new ways of working and transform how we actually work and live?
Yeah, exactly. I think another session before, I heard another customer engineer say that Google Cloud meets you where you are, and I think that's certainly a theme throughout a lot of our presentations today. It's around showing if you are new to machine learning, there are certain tools that we can work together with, and of course, if you're old hat at this like you are, Andy, of course you can use things around our TensorFlow open source framework. So as I mentioned, Google is an AI company, and these are just some of the few ways and customers which we've worked with to really build out their AI strategy and solution. So on the left-hand side, we can see Ocado. So Ocado is UK's largest online grocery retailer. And what they were able to do was actually build a customer service solution. So by using our natural language API. So as emails came in around how people were viewing their service, maybe if their delivery was running late or if it was just a thank you note to say how much they liked it, they were able to use our natural language technology to actually stack rank the order in which they would be able to get back to their customers. So that's an interesting use case. And then the second one, which I really find interesting, is our Rolls-Royce example. So we're working very closely with Rolls-Royce around helping them with their autonomous vehicle strategy. So using mostly our Vision API capabilities to help with that autonomous vehicle. Next is, how can Google inject AI into your business strategy? So there's a few different ways that we can help you with this. Firstly is the building blocks. So Google has a lot of different building blocks that we can help you build this strategy. So we'll talk about that. Next, of course, is the platform. As we mentioned, it really is a vast platform for you to be able to not only build the models, but be able to host the models. And then finally, our solution and ecosystem. So here we dive a little bit deeper into our comprehensive set of AI building blocks. On the left-hand side, you can see is sight. So things around cloud vision and being able to understand optical character recognition, like you talked about before with your receipts, understanding what's in the text, language, so speech to text translation, and conversation engine, which we'll be talking a little bit
about conversation technology.
We will. Yeah. Conversation technology, and particularly Dialogflow, which is our chatbot platform. So we do believe, though, there's a kind of a significant gap between the extremes of what's currently possible with machine learning. At one end, we have very, very experienced practitioners that we work with, and on the other hand, we're seeing people that are very, very new to machine learning that may benefit from some of our pre-packaged APIs. But then we have developers who are smack bang in the middle, and that's when our cloud technology around Cloud AutoML comes in. So this is a great platform for you to be able to simply upload your training data. It might be images, for example, upload them into a UI interface, and then be able to kind of manually label those images and then dynamically produce that model on the fly. So I think Cloud AutoML is a really nice in-between technology.
Absolutely. And where we've actually seen Cloud AutoML works quite a lot is it leverages the transfer learning technology behind the scene. And it's able to actually not just do the images, now it's actually expanding into, let's actually use AutoML to discover what works in classifying news articles, in classifying customer inquiries, in classifying incoming inquiries.
Absolutely. So let's put this all together now. Of course, we talk about machine learning as a way, that a platform for us to help our customers. But Google Cloud really has a whole platform for you to be able to get started in machine learning. As we know, machine learning typically comes at the end of a big data project. So the first thing is to understand your data in an organization. So we have tools for you to be able to firstly clean your data sets. Secondly, to be able to ingest those data sets using our PubSub capabilities, to be able to process, of course, that data once it's in Google Cloud Platform, so things around using Dataproc, our managed Spark and Hadoop service, to be able to store using things like cloud storage, our Bob Store product, and then finally our machine learning capabilities around, of course, the platform for you to train your models, or Cloud AutoML, as we mentioned before, and a playground for developers using our Python notebooks.
Yeah, and also serving models using Cloud ML.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the full gamut of ways for you to be able to go from data to exploration. So the next, of course, very exciting wave in machine learning is TPUs. And TPUs, or tensor processing units, Google is really at the forefront of pioneering this hardware technology for machine learning. So the thing is with machine TPUs rather, as models get bigger and more complex, we need to start to have fit for purpose hardware. So not only just to train the models, but also to actually run those models in production. And that's where some of our customized hardware comes in handy.
Yeah, exactly. And looking at the numbers right there, Cloud TPU version 2 sitting at 180 teraflops. Back in the days, I remember doing research around Pentium 60 back in 1994 was probably sitting about 0.00006 teraflops. And that's 3 million times faster than what it was about 14 or 15 years ago.
Yeah,
and this is amazing.
Isn't it?
And that enables the use of these hardwares to train extremely deep neural networks and to explore what can help us to advance many of the use cases.
Absolutely. So customized hardware on top of being able to train your models there. So this is truly the whole gamut. There's truly a whole gamut of ways that you can work with Google Cloud, as we mentioned before, from our AI building blocks, some of those pre-packaged APIs, to some of our newer services around our Advanced Solutions Lab, which we now have in the APAC region. We have a customer in that lab as we talk live here in Singapore right now, working on one of their projects. Of course, we have Kaggle, which is, again, fairly new for Google, which is bringing in millions of data sets for businesses to be able to combine those with their data. So really a whole gamut of ways that you can work with Google Cloud's machine learning platform. And of course, the most exciting part is to really see these models out in the wild, so to speak. It's the real use cases. So of course, we're seeing a lot of predictive maintenance in manufacturing as an example of a use case. We're seeing predictive planning and inventory in retail. And the area which I find quite interesting is what we're doing around machine learning in our healthcare and life sciences space. So really bridging our machine learning technology with the expertise of healthcare professionals and doctors to be able to predict outcomes for patients. So with that, we hope that's given you an introduction into kind of what's possible in the machine learning platform inside Google Cloud. But now we're going to jump into the super exciting part, and that's where Andy from Servian is going to talk to us about an Australian success story and how we're working together with yourselves, the partner, the customer in Google Cloud, to build this machine learning use case.
Thank you, Natalie. That's really good, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk here. And obviously, let's get onto it. So, to actually talk a little bit more about the use case, it really comes to that chatbot. I think when you look at linking machine learning in relationship to how a chatbot works, a chatbot can actually be really simple. For example, you might be looking at asking what the weather was today, and that can come back and say, well, we're just saying there's an intent classification, and we can actually train a model to classify what the intent was. It's actually asking for a weather. Now, it actually can be really complex very quickly when you start thinking about a Google Home scenario. When you look at talking to your Google Home and say, okay, Google, what's the weather like today for Sydney? And the first thing it does is pass your voice signal into a deep learning model to do speech recognition and translating that to text. And then from the text, we then pass it on to more machine learning models, ones for intent classification, knowing you're asking about the weather, not asking for transport.
That's
also knowing the entities. For example, here we're asking about Sydney, and we're asking about right now.
Yes.
So these are important factors. And then off the back of that, we can do more models to actually generate a very personalized response based on what we know and based on sophisticated backends. And then once we have all the text, we need to speak it back to the user. And that's where we need to apply another deep learning model, which is going to do the speech synthesis to speak back very naturally. Now, when we dive into each individual of these what we call AI and machine learning programs, they actually are a composite of a model which encompasses all of your application logic to some extent. And then that actually takes the input data to then compute to give you output data, whereas typically we'd be programming the application logic all into the code using a lot of if, else, then, and switch case. But in an AI machine learning program, the model is actually computed from algorithms and training data. So we no longer actually write the application logic. Now, quite often if you look up on the machine learning libraries, the machine learning part actually looks quite simple. You need to have your training data, and you just simply go and call a train function and an evaluate function, and you actually arrive at your model. And then off the back of your model, you can then call a predict function, which then gives you the output data with your input data and gives you a prediction. All looks really nice and fine until you actually dive into a little bit more about all the dependencies of where and how do we actually get the training data to actually train the model, and what are the algorithms that we can use to extract useful features and do model selection and feature selection. And with the compute, because quite often we have to deal with either large volume of data or some very complex formats of data. So scaling that compute can become quite complex as well. Now, once you have the model, you need to manage different versions of the model and different iterations of the model for different changes and requirements.
It starts to get quite complex.
It gets quite complex. So how do we then help with all of that? Well, there is a lot of open source tools and technologies, and lucky enough, we also now have cloud infrastructure. So for example, you can use the likes of TensorFlow to do your algorithms and construct your algorithms in a few lines of Python code. And you can actually serve your TensorFlow model as well in a very simple way. And then with the likes of Apache Beam and Apache Spark, you can actually do data engineering quite nicely to collect the data, engineer the features, and also reconcile your data with your input and output data. And lastly, the cloud infrastructure, that almost gives us the infinite scale to train models on large volume of data. So looking at that, then we tie it back into the chatbot. How do we use this to build a humanistic interface to create some new ways of working? Well, lucky that we have Dialogflow, which is a Google Cloud technology. First of all, Dialogflow helps us to remove the need to choose algorithms, and it helps us to do the compute as well, and it helps us in managing our model. And it provides a really nice interface for you as a user to go in there and start typing in your training data.
That's right.
And off the back of that, you can then simply use APIs to construct your smart applications, such as a Google Home application. And from there, when we look at Dialogflow, if we want to use it to construct more sophisticated applications, say, for example, a chatbot on the web that can actually speak to you, let's take that. There are models that's already pre-trained. For example, you don't have to worry about speech recognition. It's taken care of for you. And you don't have to worry about taking text and then speaking it back to the user in a very natural way, because that's a pre-trained model. And you can train the intent classification model, tell it what the intents are. You can also train for how to identify entities such as locations, numerical values, phone numbers, etc. And if you really want to get sophisticated about generating personalized responses, you can use the webhooks to actually build your own model for generating that.
Yes,
and that's great. So then I want to talk a bit more about how that differs from typical machine learning with bot training. So training a chatbot, we typically have control or full control of the actual training data. So we need to go and generate the data, whereas typically in a machine learning world, the training data is already collected. It is what it is because it represents the distribution of the data. And what we have to iterate on back in the typical machine learning way is we have to tune our algorithms, we have to tune our compute, and we have to tune all the hyperparameters and find the right features to train the optimal model. And then we have to take care of the model. But the objective is actually very much the same between the two of them. Now, when we say the objective is really coming down to the typical machine learning objectives, in this case, I'll take intent classification, for example. We're really looking at either achieving a really high precision. For example, I ask for weather. I don't want the Dialogflow component to come back to me and saying you're asking about transport. So that would be a bit silly. So how do we achieve an optimal precision, for example? How many of the predicted intents are relevant? Or how many of the relevant intents are correctly classified? So these are two of the core classification KPIs that we use to measure machine learning model, let's call it accuracy. Then there's a trade-off between the two ways of measuring it. So a better way of doing it is using something called the F1 score. So to be looking at the F1 score, we would look at how do we combine the recall and the precision to compute the F1 score. It's a number ranging from 0 to 1, and by iterating on the training data, we should be looking at improving that over time, and that manages how we release a chatbot. So looking at some production bot. Now here is where we look at our client Australian Super, and this is where it gets a bit more exciting. A little over a while back, 6 months ago, we helped Australian Super in building up their what they call the multi-channel FAQ concierge chatbot. The business problem they have is actually every time it comes to financial year end, people will start contacting their contact center, such as going onto the web chat and start asking the agents, well, how do I actually roll my super from other superannuation fund into Australian Super? Or how do I actually open up a new account with our super? Or even people will be asking, how do I actually withdraw my money? So Australian Super is actually the largest superannuation fund in Australia, and 1 in 10 Australian is a member of Australian Super as well. And myself, I'm a member of Australian Super, so it's really great feeling to help them to solve the problem.
Absolutely, and I think particularly come tax time, as you mentioned, a lot of those questions that Australians are ringing in and asking for are probably very similar. So there's probably a pattern in the amount and the types of questions that people are asking.
Yeah, absolutely. So the technical solution behind the scene is actually looking at how do we use Dialogflow to be the smart brain in driving all the conversations, and how do we collect all the conversational data for then doing analysis in improving the chatbot. So we use BigQuery and also Data Studio to do that.
That's right.
Now, coming a bit more on the lessons learned. Firstly, we've learned about how do we properly test chatbot, because coming a lot from the software engineering background, we look at testing in a heuristic way. So we'd be testing either 1 or 0s, and it's always precision dependent on the developers and engineers. And the program is designed not to make mistakes. Whereas with AI and machine learning program, with chatbots, we're no longer looking at a 100% accuracy as the target, because machine learning programs is always a probabilistic or statistical approximation to the data. So it can make mistakes. So we need to find a new way of testing it.
That's right. So I guess now it's probably a good time to jump into a demonstration, right?
Oh, absolutely. Would you like to try the chatbot?
I think it's always great to show what it's like, because then people can understand all the great work that you've been doing. So let's jump in and actually show the chatbot that you've built. So we'll use this is a real example. So we'll show this using the Google Assistant.
Fantastic.
Okay, so Andy's prepared a script here for me. So I'm going to start off by opening up my Google Assistant on my phone. So let's start. Okay, Google, speak to Australian Super.
I'm Ash, Australian Super's voice assistant. Can I start with your name?
My name is Natalie.
Hi, Natalie. I'm in training and can answer general questions about Super. Ask me a question.
I'm overseas and need to call you.
If calling from overseas, you can reach us on +61 39067 2108. The contact center is currently open. Can I help you with anything else today?
I want to speak to an agent.
So I can connect you, Natalie. Can you tell tell me your mobile number?
My number is 0452 300 941.
Setting up a call with one of our customer service officers on +61 452 300 941.
Wow.
Thanks for chatting today.
Let's wait for the phone call.
Okay. Well, there we go. Got a phone call.
Put it on speaker.
Press any key to connect to an Australian super agent.
Okay.
Awesome.
We're getting connected, but let's...
Connect to an Aus-
We'll leave that chat for another time.
Yes.
That was a really great demo, Andy, and I think, of course, there's obviously quite an in-depth conversation around machine learning, which we went through before, but this is just actually seeing it live and in person.
That's fantastic.
It really kind of just amplifies how easy it is to actually build this interaction with brands, and you obviously did that so well with Australian Super, and we're starting to see consumers all over the world starting to expect this type of ease of interaction.
And also the handover between, an agent and also a bot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, we'll come in and talk a little bit more about the solution architecture. So we actually used the Live Person platform as a contact center platform to integrate between Dialogflow, which is the brain behind the scene. And also we have a group of analysts who work on the conversation data to actually do analysis to generate new training data. And we've also got a designated natural language designer who actually look at how do we best design the conversation styles. And then what that brings is at the web chat or at the mobile app client, when a user started chatting with the Ash, the chatbot, when their question is not being answered properly, they actually can choose to be transferred to a live agent
like we just
straight
saw
away.
then.
Yeah, right there it bridges the experience from the chatbot into a real person experience, and it actually improves their customer satisfaction score as well, and freeing up and doubling their agent capacity in handling some more complex queries.
Yes, you make a good point there, because I think this is what these chatbot solutions are really about. It's working with organisations to say, how can we kind of carve off that top layer of questions that we know, our customer service, for example, those common questions, and kind of carve those off into a solution like Servian built with chatbot, and then handing off to an agent for some of those more difficult concepts. And this chatbot solution is a solution that we're seeing kind of being rolled out across all different types of industries.
Yeah. So with that said, well, let's look at how we move AI off your product roadmap and into workstreams. So what I've found is typically it's quite good for organizations to start with putting AI onto the roadmap, because to do that, you don't really need a lot of executive support or from an execution point of view. It's simply looking at how do you actually put it on your roadmap and make sure that it's going to happen.
Yes.
And then from there, we'd be looking at, well, let's actually start seeking the support from either execution or from the management to then invest in some AI POCs or proof of concepts. And moving up a ladder, when we start to see the value in these POCs, that's where we start to gain both execution traction and also executive support in strategic AI investments.
That's right. So starting to show some ROI on investment in technology. So either it's showing some great return, or potentially maybe it's showing a failure. Maybe it's helping us to pivot to try something different.
It's about us to actually learn from the data we gather.
Exactly. So POCs, of course, is so important in moving AI into your work streams. And then finally, strategic AI investment. So once we've proven to the business that we can actually build an amazing use case like we just showed with Australian Super, then we can actually start to get our executive teams to make a strategic investment into actually moving or building even more AI solutions in business.
And lastly, this is actually where I get asked a lot of questions in, what's the easiest way for us to get started with AI and machine learning? Now with Google Cloud, obviously, the easiest way is you can bring your software engineers and actually train them up on how to use many of the pre-trained models, such as the computer vision APIs, the speech recognition APIs, and even the likes of Dialogflow, because that's all you need to bring. And then off the back of that, you can start building smarter applications already.
That's right. And you know, the great thing around Dialogflow is, and we didn't show it today, but it has a fantastic UI. So it's a simple console that you log into, and it's actually, you know, you're able to go in there and start populating it with some of the questions that your organization may already get asked. And as we talked about, you know, one of the difficult things around machine learning, the chatbots rather, is not necessarily building the model. It's really around making conversational design and making sure we're asking the right questions.
Yeah, and having the right journey.
That's right. All right, so thank you so much for joining us in this session with Andy from Servian. We are going to be right back in 1 minute, and we're going to be taking some live questions, so stay tuned.
Thank you.
Welcome back. So we're now going to jump into some live Q&A on this session. So let's jump right into it and start off with the first question. So that is, what would be the next step in working with Google with our Google partner community to build out our machine learning strategy? This is a great question, because obviously, you know, we've worked very closely with Servian to build out this solution. So it sounds as if our viewers are excited to see how they might be able to build something too with you.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great question. So being a Google Cloud partner, we obviously have quite a number of machine learning engineers who are trained with the Google Cloud machine learning framework. So what we do, the best way is to engage with both business stakeholders and also technology stakeholders and have them in the same room and run a workshop. It's usually a full day workshop. Off the back of that, it runs the agenda of, let's start with explaining what AI and machine learning really is, and shoot down some of the hypes and then bring some reality into it. And then secondly, give the power to the business and the technology people to then create ideas, to then be imaginative, to put the ideas on the wall. And then off the back of that, we help them in assessing, well, are these ideas really feasible? And do you have the right data source? So that's a plan and execute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of course, partner workshops like the ones that you just mentioned are a really great way to kick off what might sound like a daunting thing, a machine learning project. So, you know, working hand in hand with our partner community, like we do in Australia with Servian, it's just it's a more comforting way, I think, to be able to partner with organisations who have expertise and have done this all before.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how much data do I need to do machine learning? This is a good question, because we get asked this all the time, unfortunately there's no silver bullet, but there certainly are some considerations.
So I think it actually is very much dependent on the problem setting. So some of the problems, for example, if we want to train an image model from scratch using, you know, Google Inception network architecture, you'd be looking at training 23 million parameters using, well, you'd be looking at millions and millions of images. But then that's not really the case when you actually have, say, a pre-trained model behind the likes of AutoML, because then it uses something called transfer learning that you can then simply apply, you know, a few images of different samples, and then that will give the machine learning to tune the model and then give you the same outcome or even better outcome to some degree. And then for some conventional structured data problems like training a churn model, training a marketing model, and looking at how do we improve certain operational efficiencies, you may not even look at needing a lot of data, but obviously the more data, the better, because the more representative the data is to the business problem, it will become a better solution and a lower risk.
That's right. So obviously there needs to be enough training data to be able to train the model, but then of course enough data to be able to test that model as well.
Absolutely.
So lots of considerations there. So look, thank you, Andy, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
This has been great.
Yeah, it's been a great experience here.
Thank you for flying all the way over from Sydney to Singapore to do this live. We really enjoyed having you. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us in this session. We hope you enjoyed this Australian example and use case. Please stay tuned for the next session, and we hope you enjoyed the conference. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying your sessions today, talking about AI, in particular across the 3 different tracks, data analytics, so how do we prepare our data for AI, around applied AI, so how can we actually use AI and actually make decisions in our business, and then around IoT as well. So both on the server side, getting all that information and data together, being able to run inference on my server, but more and more people now trying to make those decisions at the edge, or run that inference, that AI inference at the edge. So how are we doing that, and how are we enabling that with what we have in Google Cloud Platform? I'm really impressed by the number of questions and the quality of the questions that we're getting on the Q&A, on the live Q&A. We do have experts standing by ready to help. I've hopped in as well to answer a couple of questions, but please keep those questions coming during the sessions. That also helps inform us about what you need to know more about and how we can actually change these sorts of sessions in the future to provide more valuable sessions for you. Also, use that feedback button. Let us know what you thought of the sessions, what you thought of this digital conference. Let us know what you would like to see in the future. So hopefully you saw our pre-show and the keynote sessions, as well as Gojek talking about how they've expanded their business and how they've set up data platforms to help them scale their business in the region. Stay tuned after our next session, where Gojek is going to tell us how they built a fantastic demo that they did at our Google Cloud Summit in Jakarta, in Indonesia. They're going to take you through that architecture, tell you how easy it was to set that up once they had that data platform foundation ready to go. So in our next sessions, we've got more coming up in each track across data analytics, applied AI, and IoT. As I said before, keep those questions coming. It's not too late to register either. So if you found these sessions useful, and if you're looking at the agenda and you think that somebody might find one of the last sessions that we have useful as well, just forward that email, forward the URL right out of your Chrome browser bar to them. That'll give them an opportunity to register and to take advantage of these sessions that we have today. We've also had a lot of questions about the Coursera credits. So hang on. We're going to send you an email at the end of the digital conference that will provide you with a link to get access to those Coursera credits. It'll give you the capability to learn more. So there are a lot of fantastic questions, a lot of those questions of which can be answered in that training. So make sure to look out for that email. Make sure that you go to Coursera and actually use those credits and make the most out of your time today and the training that's available to you for free. So as I said before, feel free to take a look at the agenda. We have one more session in each of the tracks for you available today. So choose the track that you'd like to see next, click on it, and enjoy your session. Please, while you're watching those sessions, make sure you use Q&A. Make sure you ask those questions. We have live experts standing by, ready to assist. We really appreciate you asking the questions and joining us here today, and we want to make sure we have, or that you have, every opportunity to get the help that you need. So with that, enjoy your session. Thank you.